Sinus lutout de suite, Brenda. Les 1,8 million de dollars appartenant à ta sœur. Tu n'auras pas un seul centime. Mon père claqua un dossier beige sur la table de ma cuisine so violently that my coffee trembled in its mug. The veins in his neck bulged. My mother stepped closer, her eyes cold enough to freeze the room. Claire has 3 children, she hissed. And what do you have? A miserable job taking care of people who are already dying. This is family money, my father snapped. The second you won it, you stole it from your sister. 90 minutes earlier, my dying grandmother had pressed 2 wrinkled $1 bills into my hand and whispered, "Buy me a Willa's Wednesday." I bought the scratch-off ticket. I scratched it. And I won $1.8 million. I didn't argue. I smiled. I picked up the pen and signed their paper. Then I slid it back across the table with both hands, like a good daughter. They were already pouring wine when my father's phone rang. He answered with a smug grin. Then a woman from the Pennsylvania lottery asked him one simple question. His face turned white. The wine glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. My name is Brenda. I'm 35 years old. To understand what happened in my kitchen that afternoon, you have to understand my grandmother. Her name was Wilhelmina Elizabeth Ashcroft. She was 84 years old. And for the last 6 years of her life, I was the only person in my family who visited her. Not my father, her only son. Not my mother. Not my sister Claire. Just me. Every other Sunday, I drove 40 minutes to Rosewood Memory Care. The nurses knew my coffee order before they knew my last name. 2 creams. No sugar. Whatever was still warm. For her 80th birthday, I built my grandmother a music box. Walnut wood. Brass hinges. A tiny mechanism that played Somewhere Over the Rainbow when you wound it 3 times. I made it myself in my downstairs neighbor's workshop. When I gave it to her, she held it for a long time. She ran her fingers across the grain. Opened it. Closed it. Opened it again. Beautiful, she whispered. I'll keep something safe in here. I laughed. Like what, Grandma? Jewelry? She smiled. Something better than jewelry. I thought she meant a photograph. I had no idea she was planning for a day when she would need someone to hear the truth. She loved Pennsylvania lottery scratch-offs. The little $2 crossword tickets. She called them Willa's Wednesdays. Back in 1974, she'd won $40 on a Wednesday while working as a cashier at Bertelli's Gas and Snack. She was 33 then. Her husband had left her with a toddler and a mortgage. That $40 kept her lights on for an entire month. Every time I brought her a scratch ticket, she held it up to the light before scratching it. Cash, she'd say. Never credit. And then she'd add the same strange sentence. Don't say my name at the counter anymore, Brenda. I never asked why. I simply listened. Whatever money she won, she gave back to me. $2. $5. Once, 30. For gas, she'd say. Even when she forgot what year it was, she remembered that. The last time I saw her truly lucid before everything changed, she smoothed my hair back with her thumb. You're my quiet one, Brenda, she said softly. The world doesn't know it yet. My parents had another name for me. The responsible one. I was 8 years old when it started. My sister Claire was 5. Blonde. Beautiful. Everyone's favorite. She knocked one of my grandmother's antique plates off the coffee table trying to reach a cookie. It shattered. My mother didn't yell at Claire. She looked at me instead. I was sitting 3 feet away, reading a book. "Brenda," she said, "why weren't you watching your sister?" I apologized. I took the punishment. I was punished for Claire's mistakes 2 more times before I turned 10. My mother had a saying. She still uses it. "Claire is sensitive. You're stronger." She said it in 1998. She said it in 2003 when Claire got caught shoplifting and I was grounded for not being a better example. She said it again in 2011 when Claire got pregnant during senior year and my parents pulled me away from my part-time job to help her. Claire later lost the baby. Nobody ever talked about it again. But the phrase remained. "You're stronger. You're stronger. You're stronger." Eventually it meant something different. It meant, "You're the one who pays." In March of 2023, Claire called me sobbing at 11:30 at night. Her husband, Ryan, had a new business idea. A gourmet grilled cheese food truck. They needed $18,000. And Claire knew something. She knew I had exactly $18,000 in savings. I had spent 4 years putting it aside to replace my aging Honda. She cried for 40 minutes. She told me she had never asked me for anything. She had actually asked for 8 different things. I wrote the check. The food truck opened on May 6th. It closed before summer ended. Ryan disappeared for 6 weeks and returned with another business idea. Nobody ever mentioned my $18,000 again. Neither did my parents. I stopped counting the loans after the 4th one. This was the 7th. In 2019, I left my ICU job and became a hospice nurse. I called my mother to tell her. She was silent for a long time. Then she laughed. "So you're leaving real medicine to babysit people who are already gone?" I explained hospice care, pain management, comfort, presence, family support. She interrupted. "That's what my daughter is doing?" She never asked about my work again. Last September, my father called asking for $2,000 to repair a roof leak. "If you love us," he said, "you'll figure something out." I hung up before he finished. Then I sat in my car and said something out loud for the first time in my life. They've never once asked what I'm built for. I didn't know it then. But my grandmother had already asked herself that same question. And she had been planning my answer for 4 years. Sometime in 2024, my parents stopped visiting my grandmother. I didn't notice at first. Rosewood Memory Care kept a visitor log at the front desk, a thick notebook with 1 line for every visit. Every time I came, I signed it. Name. Relationship. Time in. Time out. Just another routine. Then one Sunday in September of 2025, while waiting for the facility director to bring me paperwork, I flipped through the pages. And froze. My name. My name. My name. Page after page. The last time my father had signed in was April 12, 2024. My mother had never once signed her own name. Claire's signature appeared exactly once. August of 2023. That was it. 19 months. I looked up. "Are these records right?" I asked. The director gave me that careful smile people use around uncomfortable family truths. "We don't judge, Miss Granger. Everyone visits when they can." I thought about those words all the way to my grandmother's room. That afternoon, she handed me a stack of bank statements. They had been folded neatly and hidden inside a paperback copy of Anne of Green Gables. "2 of them, Brenda," she said. Her finger pointed at 2 withdrawals. May 2024. October 2024. $8,500 each. Cash withdrawals. I looked at the signatures. They were supposed to be hers. They weren't. I knew her handwriting. These signatures looked wrong. Do you want me to call Dad? I asked. Her hand shot out and wrapped around my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Not yet. Her voice was low. Keep those statements somewhere safe. I slipped them into my nurse's bag. I didn't ask why. Part of me already knew. I just wasn't ready to admit it. Thanksgiving morning. November 27th, 2025. I brought her pumpkin pie. She was sitting by the window wearing her favorite purple cardigan. Her hair was combed. Her eyes were bright. 2 clear days in a row, Brenda, she said. I immediately knew what that meant. I had been a hospice nurse for 6 years. I'd watched more than 100 people die. I knew terminal lucidity. Sometimes, right before the end, a person's mind suddenly becomes sharp again. They remember names. They tell stories. They say things they've needed to say. And then, they're gone. I sat beside her. I'm not having that conversation today, Grandma. She smiled gently. You already had it. I frowned. Last week, she said. You know what to do now. I stared at her. She was right. 1 week earlier, she had changed everything. But before I can tell you about that day, I need to tell you about the morning after. Black Friday. I wasn't planning to visit her. I had work. I had errands. But at 9:30 that morning, something pulled me back into my car. I can't explain it. I just knew I needed to see her. I drove the familiar road to Rosewood. She was in the community room again. Purple cardigan. Hair combed. Waiting. I wasn't sure you'd come today, she said. It's Black Friday. Everyone is shopping. I smiled. I'm not everyone. No, she said softly. You're not. Then she reached into her sweater pocket. She pulled out 2 crumpled $1 bills. She folded my fingers around them. Buy me a Willa's Wednesday. I smiled. Grandma, last week we agreed I'd use my own money. She shook her head. Today it has to be mine. I looked into her eyes. She was completely serious. Trust me. I slipped the money into my wallet. I kissed her forehead. She smelled faintly of lavender. Then I drove to Bertelli's Gas and Snack. The place had been there forever. Same green sign. Same flickering lights. Same scratch ticket display behind the counter. Sal Bertelli's son was working that morning. A thick, broad man in his 60s. Willa's Wednesday? I said. Cash. Just one. He handed me the ticket. I paid with my grandmother's $2. Then I scratched it right there at the counter. I usually waited. I didn't this time. Maybe because she'd said, trust me. Maybe because something inside me already knew. One number matched. Then another. Then another. Then another. Then 5. I stared. At the bottom of the ticket was the prize amount. $1,800,000. I read it once. Twice. 3 times. I couldn't breathe. The man behind the counter was staring at me. He'd been selling lottery tickets most of his life. He recognized the look on my face. "Kid," he said quietly. "Put the ticket down." I looked up. "Don't fold it. Don't touch it. Don't do anything." He reached for the phone. "I'm calling retailer support." Then his eyes dropped to my hand. My keys were sitting on the counter. A small silver charm hung from the keychain. A tiny sparrow. My grandmother had given it to me when I graduated nursing school. The man's expression changed. He stared at the charm. Then at me. "Where'd you get that bird?" "My grandmother." "What's her name?" "Wilhelmina Ashcroft." He went completely still. For several seconds, he didn't speak. Then he opened the cooler behind him and handed me a Coke. "On the house." I blinked. He looked emotional. "Your grandma bought me my first school uniform." I stared at him. He swallowed. "I was 8 years old. My father had left us. My mother worked here. We didn't have money." His eyes filled with tears. "Your grandmother paid for it herself. Never told anyone." He smiled sadly. "You tell her Sal Bertelli says thank you." I sat in my car for a long time after that. The winning ticket rested in my wallet. The unopened Coke sat in my cup holder. I didn't start the engine. I simply sat there. Then I picked up my phone. I opened a contact I had saved a week earlier. I typed one message. "It's today. Kitchen. 15 minutes. The reply came instantly. "On my way."
I started the car and drove home. 15 minutes. That was all it took. The winning ticket sat inside my wallet, folded carefully behind my driver's license. The unopened Coke rested in the cup holder. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't think about the money. I thought about the plan. Because what was about to happen in my kitchen had nothing to do with becoming a millionaire. It had everything to do with something my grandmother had done 8 days earlier. 8 days before Black Friday, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. I was still asleep. It rang again. And again. I finally answered. It was Colleen, the director of Rosewood. "Now," she said. I sat upright. "What?" She said one word, "Brenda." "Now." Then she said, "Call my granddaughter now." I was out of bed in seconds. I canceled my patient visit, threw on my scrubs, and drove straight to Rosewood. I didn't even stop for coffee. That alone should have told me something was different. When I walked into her room, my grandmother was sitting up in bed. The music box was resting on her lap. She looked at me the way she used to when I was a little girl and had done something right. "Close the door," she said. I did. "Sit." I sat. She opened the music box. Inside was a small black digital recorder. A tiny green light glowed on it. I stared. She smiled. "I told you I'd keep something safe in here." I looked from the recorder to her face. "What is this?" "Everything." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Everything they did." The room suddenly felt colder. She touched the recorder gently. "There's one file. 63 minutes long." I didn't move. "I made it for you." "Grandma." "Take it." "I don't understand." "You will." She picked up my canvas bag and placed the music box inside herself. Her hands shook. "Listen alone," she said. "Not here. Not at your parents' house. Somewhere private." I was scared now. Grandma, what is on this? She looked directly into my eyes. The truth. Then she took my hand. When the day comes, and it will come sooner than you think, you'll know exactly what to do. I left Rosewood in a daze. The sun was setting. I sat in my car. The recorder lay in my lap. I plugged in my headphones. Then I pressed play. Her voice filled my ears. Clear. Strong. Steady. My name is Wilhelmina Elizabeth Ashcroft. Today is August 15th, 2023. I am recording this because my son and his wife have been stealing from me, and I want my granddaughter Brenda to have proof when the day comes. I stopped breathing. She continued. She listed dates. Accounts. Withdrawals. 11 cash withdrawals over 4 years. $88,000 gone. She named bank branches. Amounts. Even the name of a teller. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. I watched my son practice my signature. I covered my mouth. She kept talking. She described my sister visiting Rosewood with legal documents. She described my father bringing power of attorney papers. She described my mother going through her jewelry box while pretending she was asleep. She described pills disappearing after visits. Every detail. Every date. Every lie. And then she said something that broke me. I let them think I didn't know. I closed my eyes. Her voice softened. I did it to protect you, Brenda. Because I know you. You would have started giving pieces of yourself away before I stopped being able to fight. Tears filled my eyes. So I waited. I waited until I could hand you all of it at once. Then you would know what to do. The recording ended with her humming Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I sat in that parking lot for 30 minutes. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I just cried. Then I opened the Notes app on my phone. And I wrote 3 things. A lawyer. A lottery compliance contact. And one final note. Do not confront them until they cross one more line. I didn't know what that line would be. I just knew it was coming. 8 days later, my grandmother handed me 2 crumpled dollars. I bought a scratch ticket. And I won $1.8 million. Then my family crossed the line. The week between that recording and Thanksgiving was the quietest week of my life. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call my sister. I said nothing. I watched. And I prepared. On Monday, I drove to the Pennsylvania Lottery Claims Office during my lunch break. I told the receptionist I was a hospice nurse asking questions for a patient's family. That wasn't entirely a lie. I met a compliance officer named Nora Whitfield. She had tired eyes and the calm voice of someone who spent her days dealing with other people's dreams. She walked me through the process. Winner's statement of sole ownership. Affidavit forms. Verification procedures. Then she explained something that caught my attention. For high-value prizes, we sometimes make courtesy notifications if specific family members are listed as parties with no ownership agreement. I looked at her. What do you mean? If there are people likely to claim they deserve part of the prize, we document it in advance. I nodded slowly. Before I left, I saved her extension in my phone. 219. On Tuesday, I met with Marcia Hendricks. She used to be a hospice nurse. Now she was a mobile notary. I'd worked with her during the pandemic. We sat in a coffee shop for nearly 2 hours. I told her everything. The recordings. The bank withdrawals. My grandmother. The way my family had treated me my entire life. Marcia never interrupted. She simply listened. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. If you need me anytime in the next 6 months, she said quietly, I will drop everything and be at your house in 30 minutes. I looked at her. Why? She smiled sadly. Because every family has a Brenda. I almost cried. On Wednesday, she came to my house. We sat at my kitchen table and walked through the state's online claim system. Practice forms. Electronic submissions. Verification steps. Everything. By the time she left, I knew exactly what to do. I thought I was preparing for the day my parents emptied my grandmother's final account. I had no idea I was preparing for something much bigger. Then Black Friday happened. At 12:20 p.m., I pulled into my driveway. A winning lottery ticket worth $1.8 million sat inside my wallet. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages. The house was silent. At exactly 12:30, Marcia arrived. She came through the back door carrying a black case and her laptop. "Show me the ticket," she said. I did. She looked at the numbers. Then at me. "Okay. Walk me through what you want." I explained everything. She listened carefully. Then she opened her laptop. The state lottery portal was already ready. "2 forms," she said. "You read them out loud." I witness. I notarize. I upload. I nodded. Page 1 was simple. Name. Date of birth. Address. Ticket serial number. Prize amount. Retailer. I completed every line. Then came page 2. I took a deep breath. I read aloud. I, Brenda Marie Granger, swear under penalty of perjury that I alone purchased the ticket with my own funds, that I hold sole ownership, and that no verbal or written agreement exists conveying any portion of this prize to any third party. Marcia looked up. "Keep going." I did. I listed every person who might later claim otherwise. My father. My mother. My sister. No ownership agreements. No promises. No rights. Nothing. Marcia made notes. I signed. She notarized. Blue seal. Date. Time. 12:45 p.m. November 28, 2025. She scanned the documents and uploaded everything. A minute later, an email appeared. Preliminary claim received. I stared at the screen. It was real. Marcia packed her things. At the back door, she paused. "Your grandmother would be proud of you." I swallowed. "She already is." Marcia smiled. Then she looked at her watch. "One more thing." "What?" "The courtesy calls usually go out fast." "How fast?" She shrugged. "Sometimes within the hour." Then she left. I sat alone in my kitchen. The winning ticket lay beside my coffee. I looked at it. Then at my phone. 12:55 p.m. The doorbell rang. Exactly 1 o'clock. I looked through the peephole. My father stood there holding a bottle of wine. Under his arm was a thick manila folder. My mother stood beside him carrying 2 wine glasses. I didn't move. My father tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. He let himself in. He didn't greet me. Didn't smile. Didn't ask permission. He walked straight into my kitchen. My mother followed. My father placed the wine on the counter. Then he slammed the folder onto my table. "Sign it right now, Brenda." I looked at him. He pointed at the folder. "All $1.8 million belongs to your sister." My mother folded her arms. "Ashley has 3 children," she said coldly. "What do you have?" I didn't answer. "You don't need this money." My father pushed the folder toward me. "This is family money." I slowly opened it. 8 pages. Cheap printer paper. A fake family trust agreement. The beneficiary section listed exactly one person. My sister. 100%. $1.8 million. At the bottom was a blank line. Waiting for my signature. I looked up. Neither of them realized they were already too late. I turned the first page. Then the second. The third. I read every word. It was laughable. A fake family distribution agreement. No state seal. No attorney. No notary. No claim number. Just 8 pages of printer paper and desperation. My mother watched me carefully. Don't sit there acting like you understand money, Brenda. I looked up. She kept going. You spend your days taking care of people who are dying. This is real life. This is family. My father leaned over the table. Your sister sold her wedding ring for Christmas presents. She's struggling. She has children. I said nothing. I set the folder down. Then I stood. Neither of them spoke. I walked to the coffee maker. Poured myself another cup. Added cream. Stirred it slowly. I didn't offer them any. I returned to the table. My father looked irritated. Brenda. I ignored him. I picked up the pen he had brought. Black barrel. Gold trim. The expensive anniversary pen my mother had given him years ago. He had brought it expecting a celebration. Expecting obedience. Expecting me. I signed. Page 1. Then page 3. Then page 8. My handwriting was perfectly neat. I didn't shake. I didn't hesitate. I closed the folder. Folded it neatly. Then I slid it back across the table with both hands. Like a good daughter. There, I said quietly. All signed. My father's face lit up. He opened the folder. Saw my signature. And smiled. The same smile he wore when I was 6 years old and had done exactly what I was told. That's my girl. He actually looked proud. See, he said to my mother. This is how family works. My mother was already opening the wine. She poured one glass. Then another. Then a third and pushed it toward me. She raised hers. To family. I picked up my glass. I didn't drink. My father lifted his. And then his phone rang. Unknown caller. 717 area code. He frowned. Probably the bank, he said. He looked pleased with himself. Told you this would move quickly. He answered on speaker. Clifford Granger speaking. A calm woman's voice came through. Mr. Granger, this is Nora Whitfield from the Pennsylvania Lottery Compliance Office. I saw my father's smile freeze. I'm calling regarding your daughter's claim. Do you have a moment? Of course. He still sounded confident. Nora continued. We received a winner's statement of sole ownership under Ms. Brenda Granger's name alone, notarized at 12:45 this afternoon and officially filed at 12:52. My father didn't move. In her affidavit, Nora said, she listed you as an individual with whom no third-party ownership agreement exists. Silence. Under state procedure, I need to ask you directly, Mr. Granger, do you dispute her sole ownership of the prize? The kitchen went completely silent. My mother's wineglass stopped halfway to her lips. My father didn't blink. I'm sorry. He said slowly. What? Nora repeated every word. Carefully. Patiently. She said sole ownership 3 times. She said affidavit twice. I watched the color drain from my father's face. He slowly lowered the phone. Set it on the table. Right beside the fake agreement. His hand was shaking. I had never seen his hand shake. Ever. He looked at me. His voice sounded thin. Almost frightened. Brenda. I waited. What did you sign? I placed my coffee cup onto its saucer. Very gently. The right paperwork, Dad. He stared. I signed it half an hour before you got here. My mother lunged for the folder. She flipped through it. Page after page. Then stopped. No state seal. No claim number. No notary. No timestamps. Nothing. Just printer paper. And signatures that meant absolutely nothing. Her face changed. She looked like someone watching her own house burn down. You lied to us. Her voice trembled. The anger was gone. Fear had replaced it. Brenda, we're your parents. I looked at her. The Lord sees what you're doing. I held her gaze. He probably does. Neither of us spoke. Then I asked quietly. Do you? The wine glass slipped from my father's fingers. It hit the edge of the table. Then the hardwood floor. It shattered. The sound seemed to echo through the entire house. Red wine spread across the floor in a dark stain. Nobody moved. I could smell the coffee. The wine. My father's aftershave. And the faint chemical scent of fresh printer ink coming from the meaningless folder lying on my kitchen table. Then Nora's voice came through the speaker again. Mr. Granger? Are you still there? No answer. Mr. Granger, do you dispute your daughter's sole ownership of the prize? My father simply stared at the phone. He looked completely lost. I had never seen him like that. For my entire life, my father always had an answer. Always had control. Always knew exactly what to say. Not this time. I'll take that as a no, Nora said politely. The file will be finalized Monday morning. If you or your wife wish to contest it, you have 30 days to file with the compliance office. Thank you for your time, Mr. Granger. Have a lovely holiday weekend. The line disconnected. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Endless. My father slowly stood up. His chair scraped across the tile. He looked at me. Then at the wine on the floor. Then at the folder. He didn't touch it. Didn't pick up the broken glass. Didn't say another word. He simply turned and walked away. Straight out of my kitchen. Straight through the front door. I heard his car door slam outside. Then the engine. Then nothing. My mother remained standing. She stared at me. I couldn't read her expression. Anger. Shock. Fear. Maybe all three. For a moment, she looked older. Smaller somehow. Then she quietly picked up her tote bag. She didn't take the wine. She didn't take the folder. She didn't say goodbye. She simply followed my father out of the house. The front door closed. And everything became quiet again. I sat there. For a long time. Finally, I stood. I grabbed a broom from the pantry. And I swept up the broken glass. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But I didn't. Instead, I felt something strange. Relief. As if I had been carrying something heavy my entire life and someone had finally taken it off my shoulders. I finished cleaning. Then I folded the fake agreement and threw it into the trash. I looked at the winning ticket. Still lying beside my coffee. Still real. I picked it up carefully. Then I walked to the living room and sat on the couch. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there. For the first time in 35 years. Nobody was asking me to give something away. At exactly 9:15 the next morning, my doorbell rang again. I looked through the peephole. My sister Claire stood on my porch. Behind her was Ryan. And all three kids. Tyler. Maddie. Little Jasper sleeping on his father's shoulder. Claire's eyes were already red. She had been crying. I closed my eyes for a second. Then I unlocked the door. Brenda. She whispered. I stepped aside. Come in. The children walked inside quietly. Tyler looked confused. Maddie was chewing on the end of her scarf. Jasper never woke up. I handed the kids juice boxes and some picture books. Then I closed the sliding door between the living room and kitchen. I sat down. Claire didn't. She immediately started talking. Dad called last night. I said nothing. He told me everything. Still nothing. She began crying again. You don't understand what it's like, Bren. I looked at her. You've never had to feed a family. Ryan stared at the floor. Our credit cards are maxed out, she said. We're behind on the mortgage. The internet got shut off. Do you know what it's like trying to explain that to a 7-year-old? I remained silent. Grandma's cabin should go to me and the kids anyway. It's more space than you need. I slowly looked up. And Mom said? She stopped. I waited. Mom said Grandma always wanted us to have it. I said nothing. Because I knew something she didn't. My grandmother had already left the cabin to me. Years ago. And she had deliberately lied to my parents. She had wanted to see what they would do if they thought they were entitled to something that wasn't theirs. Now I knew. They had failed the test. Completely. Claire kept talking. She pleaded. She cried. She explained. She justified. I simply listened. Finally, she ran out of words. She gathered the children. Ryan picked up Jasper. They headed toward the front door. Then Ryan stopped. He still didn't look directly at me. He spoke while staring at the wall. Just make sure nothing happens to that money before Monday, sis. He finally looked at me. It'd be a shame if something did. Then he walked out. I locked the front door. Twice. Because Ryan didn't make threats. He dropped them softly. And let other people hear them. I didn't ignore Ryan's words. I just refused to be afraid of them. I called my next-door neighbor, Delaney Ross. We'd worked together in the ICU years earlier. She was the kind of person who could walk into a burning building and somehow make everyone inside feel calm. Are you busy? I asked. She didn't even hesitate. I'll be there in 5. She arrived with her dog and a bottle of ginger ale. I didn't explain everything. I didn't have to. She looked at my face and knew enough. We sat at my kitchen table for the rest of the afternoon. We watched an old cooking show. She sliced up a Granny Smith apple and handed me half. We barely talked. At 4 o'clock, she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. You are safe here. I looked at her. And for the first time in 2 days, I believed someone. Sunday morning, November 30th, I drove back to Rosewood. My grandmother was fading. One moment she recognized me. The next, she drifted somewhere I couldn't follow. Then she came back again. She held my hand for a long time. Her grip was weaker now. I knew what that meant. Hospice teaches you to recognize the smallest changes. The body starts letting go quietly. You listened, she whispered. I leaned closer. You listened. That was all she said. Twice. Then she closed her eyes and rested. I sat beside her until visiting hours ended. I kissed her forehead before leaving. I remember looking back from the doorway. She looked so small in that bed. And suddenly I knew. I wouldn't have much time left with her. I was right. 4 days later, at 3:22 in the morning, my phone rang. I woke instantly. It was Colleen. Her voice was soft. The kind of soft people learn after standing beside death too many times. Brenda, she's asking for you. I was already out of bed. Come now. I drove Route 307 in darkness. A thin fog covered the fields. The road was empty. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry. Not yet. When I reached Rosewood, she was still alive. Barely. She lay in bed with her eyes closed. One hand rested beside her, searching. Waiting. I sat down. I took her hand. Her fingers closed around mine. Slowly, she opened her eyes. You came. I'm here, Grandma. She smiled. A tiny smile. No bigger than sunlight slipping through curtains. You listened. I couldn't answer. My throat wouldn't work. She squeezed my hand one last time. You are the one who listened. A tear rolled down my face. I'm here, I whispered. Her smile stayed for another few seconds. Then she closed her eyes. And just before sunrise, she stopped breathing. The room became impossibly quiet. I didn't move. I sat there holding her hand. Still warm. Still hers. A few minutes later, Colleen entered. She was crying. She sat beside me and didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Eventually she handed me a small plastic case. Inside was a USB drive. She wanted you to have this after. Colleen couldn't finish. I looked at the drive. What is it? Hallway footage. I frowned. August 14th, 2023. I looked up. Your sister came here that day with documents. I remembered the recording. Colleen nodded. Your grandmother refused to sign. I stared at the drive. I filed an incident report that same day. The report number is on this. I slipped the drive into my coat pocket. As I turned to leave, another voice stopped me. Brenda. I looked back. It was Doris. My grandmother's roommate. 82 years old. Always wearing the same pale blue cardigan. She held out a small black notebook. She wrote things down. I carefully took it. Names. Dates. Things people said when they thought nobody was listening. I looked at the notebook. Why give it to me? Doris smiled sadly. Because she told me to wait until she couldn't anymore. I felt my eyes burn again. Doris touched my arm. She had a name for you. I looked up. The one who listens. I couldn't speak. I held the notebook against my chest. Then I walked to the front desk. I signed the visitor log one final time. Name. Brenda Granger. Relationship. Granddaughter. Time out. 6:03 a.m. I stared at the page. Then I closed the book. And walked out into a world that no longer had my grandmother in it. The funeral was on Saturday. Cold. Gray. The kind of December morning that makes every tree look like it's grieving. I arrived 30 minutes early. Because I always did. I wore the navy blue dress my grandmother once said made me look capable. The church smelled like old wood and candle wax. I sat in the second row. The first row remained empty. For 11 minutes. Then my parents arrived. My mother wore black and carried tissues. My father looked exhausted. Neither of them looked at me. Then Claire entered. She was crying loudly. Ryan followed behind her, carrying Jasper. The children looked confused. Too young to understand death. The service began. Father Michael spoke about kindness. About service. About quiet people who change lives without demanding recognition. I nearly smiled. That was my grandmother. Then people began sharing memories. A former neighbor stood first. Then an old librarian. Then someone who had worked with her 30 years earlier. Story after story. The same theme. She helped people. Quietly. Without asking for credit. I noticed something. None of us knew most of these stories. Then Sal Bertelli stood. I recognized him immediately. He walked slowly to the front. Adjusted his glasses. And looked directly at me. When I was 8 years old, he said, my mother couldn't afford my school uniform. He swallowed. I thought I wouldn't be able to attend school that year. He smiled sadly. Mrs. Ashcroft bought it for me. I felt my throat tighten. She made me promise never to tell anyone while she was alive. He looked around the church. I think she'd forgive me today. Soft laughter spread through the room. He continued. She told me something else that day. He looked directly at me again. She said, when you help someone, don't stand in front of the light afterward. Move aside and let them shine. Silence. I couldn't breathe. Because those words sounded exactly like her. Then Sal returned to his seat. The service ended. People stood. Coats rustled. Voices filled the room. And then a woman touched my arm. I turned. I had never seen her before. She looked to be in her 60s. Silver hair. Green scarf. Kind eyes. Brenda? Yes. She smiled. I'm Eleanor Pierce. I waited. I was your grandmother's attorney. Everything inside me stopped. She reached into her purse. Pulled out a large white envelope. And handed it to me. She instructed me to give this to you after the funeral. I stared at it. Open it at home. Then she smiled gently. And Brenda. Yes? Your grandmother was very proud of you. Then she walked away. I stood there holding the envelope. My mother noticed immediately. What is that? I looked up. Nothing. She stepped closer. Who was that woman? I said nothing. My father's eyes narrowed. Is it about the estate? Still nothing. Claire had stopped crying. She was watching me carefully now. I slipped the envelope into my purse. My mother crossed her arms. What did she leave you? I looked at her. I don't know yet. Open it. No. Open it right now. I held her gaze. No. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then my father spoke. His voice was quiet. Dangerously quiet. Don't start this today. I looked at him. Today? I almost laughed. Because today was the first day I wasn't starting anything. I was simply refusing to continue it. I walked past them. All four of them turned to watch me leave. I drove home. Locked my front door. Sat at my kitchen table. And looked at the envelope. My name was written across the front. In my grandmother's handwriting. I carefully opened it. Inside were 3 items. A letter. A key. And a sealed manila envelope labeled. For Brenda only. Open last. My hands were shaking. I unfolded the letter. And began to read. I unfolded the letter carefully. The paper smelled faintly of lavender. Her handwriting was shaky in places, but unmistakably hers. My quiet Brenda. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. I wish I could sit across from you one more time and tell you these things myself, but I've learned something about life. You don't always get one more conversation, asterisk asterisk. You spent your whole life being the one who stayed. The one who fixed things. The one who sacrificed first and asked questions later. They called you strong because it was easier than thanking you. They called you responsible because it was easier than protecting you, asterisk asterisk. I saw everything. I stopped reading. Tears blurred the words. I blinked and continued. I saw every birthday gift you bought for everyone else while receiving almost nothing yourself. I saw you hand over money you needed. I saw you miss opportunities because someone in this family demanded another piece of you, asterisk asterisk. And I saw something they never saw. You listened. You listened when people were hurting. You listened when they were frightened. You listened when they were dying. You listened to me when nobody else did, asterisk asterisk. My hands trembled. There are people who speak loudly and leave no mark on this world. Then there are people like you. They change lives quietly. They make others feel seen. They become home for people who have nowhere else to go, asterisk asterisk. A tear fell onto the page. I wiped it away. I know you don't see yourself clearly. So let me tell you who you are, asterisk asterisk. You are kind without weakness. Gentle without fear. Strong without cruelty. And you are worthy of being loved exactly as you are, asterisk asterisk. I covered my mouth. Nobody had ever spoken to me like that. Not once. I kept reading. The key in this envelope belongs to my cabin at Pine Lake. It has belonged to you since 2021. The deed is already in your name. Eleanor has all the paperwork, asterisk asterisk. I stared at the sentence. The cabin. Mine. She had transferred it years ago. I did not tell anyone because I wanted one thing from your family. I wanted to know what they would choose if they believed something belonged to them, asterisk asterisk. Now you know. I closed my eyes. She had known. She had known exactly what would happen. I opened them again. There was one final paragraph. There is something else for you in the manila envelope. Open it last, just as I instructed. And remember this, Brenda, you do not owe people access to your heart simply because they share your blood. Love is given freely. Entitlement is not love, asterisk asterisk. Thank you for listening to me when everyone else stopped. I love you. Grandma. I sat there crying. Not because she was gone. Not only because of that. I cried because for 35 years, I had wanted someone to see me. And she had. The entire time. Eventually, I picked up the key. A small brass key. A faded blue tag. Pine Lake. I turned it over in my hand. Then I looked at the final envelope. For Brenda only. Open last, asterisk asterisk. I broke the seal. Inside was another letter. And a check. I nearly dropped it. $50,000. Payable to me. Signed by my grandmother. The memo line read. For the life you keep postponing. I couldn't breathe. I unfolded the second letter. Brenda. This money came from a certificate of deposit I opened years ago. Nobody knows it exists. Not my son. Not your mother. Not Claire. I wanted you to have something that belonged only to you. No guilt. No demands. No negotiations. Then came the final lines. Buy a better car. Travel somewhere beautiful. Take 6 months off if you want. Fall in love. Learn to paint. Sit by the lake and do absolutely nothing. For once in your life, choose yourself first. At the bottom of the page, she had written one final sentence. The world doesn't know it yet, my quiet Brenda, but you're about to begin your real life. The following Monday, I claimed the prize. I wore navy scrubs because I had work afterward. The Pennsylvania lottery office sat inside a plain brick building that looked far too ordinary for life-changing moments. I carried the ticket in a document sleeve. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Nora Whitfield met me in the lobby. She smiled. You made it. I did. She led me to a conference room. 3 signatures. 2 forms. 1 final verification. Then she slid the paperwork toward me. Congratulations, Ms. Granger. I looked at the document. Claim approved. $1.8 million. Real. I expected fireworks. I expected some dramatic feeling. Instead, I felt calm. As if I had been preparing for this moment my entire life. Nora looked at me. Most people cry. I smiled. I've had a strange week. She laughed softly. I imagine you have. Before I left, she handed me a folder. Financial planning information. Tax estimates. Counseling services for sudden wealth recipients. At the door, she paused. Can I give you one piece of advice? Please. Money doesn't change people. I waited. It just removes the waiting. I thought about my parents. My sister. Ryan. Then I nodded. I think I already learned that. I returned to work. I didn't tell anyone. At 2 in the afternoon, I helped an elderly man eat peach yogurt. At 3, I adjusted another patient's oxygen tubing. At 4, I sat beside a woman while she cried because her husband no longer remembered her name. Nobody knew I was a millionaire. And strangely, I liked it that way. At 6 o'clock, I checked my phone. 17 missed calls. 8 text messages. All from my family. I didn't read them. I drove home. When I turned onto my street, I saw my parents' car parked outside. And Ryan's truck. I sighed. Then I parked. My father was waiting on my porch. He stood as I approached. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said something I never expected to hear. I made mistakes. I looked at him. He looked exhausted. Older. Smaller. I wasn't a very good father to you. I didn't respond. He swallowed. Can we talk? I unlocked my front door. I left it open. We walked inside. My mother sat at my kitchen table. Claire sat beside her. Ryan leaned against the counter. Nobody spoke. I remained standing. Finally, my mother looked up. We've been thinking. I almost smiled. That sentence had never led anywhere good. She folded her hands. We owe you an apology. Silence. Claire began crying immediately. I'm sorry, Bren. Ryan stared at the floor. My father looked directly at me. We haven't treated you fairly. I waited. We relied on you too much. Still waiting. And maybe. He said quietly, we forgot you were our daughter too. The room went silent. Because that sentence. That one sentence. Was the closest thing to truth I had ever heard from him. Claire looked up. We can do better. Ryan nodded. We can fix this. I looked at each of them. Then I thought about my grandmother. I thought about the recordings. The withdrawals. The forged signatures. The years. I thought about the visitor log. Page after page. My name. My name. My name. I finally sat down. Nobody moved. I folded my hands. And spoke. I forgive you. 3 people started crying. Ryan exhaled. My father closed his eyes. Then I continued. But nothing goes back to the way it was. Silence. I won't give anyone money. Claire's face changed. I won't take responsibility for problems I didn't create. My mother looked down. And I won't allow guilt to make decisions for me anymore. Nobody spoke. I stood. I hope your lives become wonderful. I meant it. I hope your children are healthy. I hope your marriage survives. I hope you all find happiness. Claire was openly crying now. But my life belongs to me. The room became perfectly still. Then I said the words my grandmother had been teaching me my entire life. No. Just one word. No anger. No cruelty. No shouting. Simply. No. I walked to the front door and held it open. My family stared at me. My father stood first. Then my mother. Then Claire. Ryan was the last to move. At the doorway, my father stopped. He looked at me for a long time. Then he nodded once. A small nod. Almost respectful. Then they left. I locked the door. Twice. I looked around my quiet house. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the brass key. Pine Lake. I smiled. For the first time in my life. I wasn't the strong one. I wasn't the responsible one. I wasn't the daughter who existed to be spent. I was simply Brenda. And my real life was finally beginning. 1 week later, I drove to Pine Lake. Snow covered the narrow road leading to the cabin. Tall pine trees lined both sides, their branches heavy with white. I parked and turned off the engine. For a moment, I just sat there. The brass key rested in my palm. Pine Lake. Mine. That word still felt strange. Mine. Not borrowed. Not shared. Not owed to anyone. I stepped out of the car. The cabin looked exactly as I remembered. Green shutters. Stone chimney. A small porch with a wooden swing. I hadn't been there in years. My parents had always called it the family cabin. Apparently, it had stopped being that a long time ago. I climbed the steps and unlocked the door. The smell hit me instantly. Pine. Old books. Firewood. And something else. Lavender. I froze. It smelled like my grandmother. I closed the door behind me. Everything was exactly where she had left it. The quilt folded over the couch. The tiny ceramic bird beside the fireplace. Her reading glasses resting on an end table. I slowly walked through each room. Then I noticed an envelope sitting on the kitchen counter. My name was written on it. Brenda. I laughed softly through my tears. Of course. Of course she had left one more thing. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. My quiet Brenda. If you came here, then you finally listened to me completely. I smiled. Sit on the porch before you read the rest. I looked toward the front windows. Then I obeyed. I carried the letter outside and sat on the wooden swing. The lake stretched before me. Perfectly still. Snow covered the shore. The world was silent. I continued reading. Good. I knew you'd do exactly what I asked, asterisk asterisk. I laughed again. A real laugh this time. I've been sitting on this porch for 40 years. I watched storms here. I watched sunsets here. I watched birds build nests and children skip stones. I cried here after my husband left. I celebrated here after difficult years ended. This porch taught me something important, asterisk asterisk. Everything changes. I looked out at the water. She was right. Everything did. Pain changes. Families change. Grief changes. Even love changes shape. But peace only arrives when you stop fighting to become who everyone else expects you to be. ***. A tear slid down my cheek. I don't want you to become rich, Brenda. I want you to become free. ***. I lowered the letter. Free. I wasn't sure anyone had ever wanted that for me before. I continued. Take this cabin. Fill it with people who make you feel safe. Drink coffee on this porch. Read books. Sleep late sometimes. Laugh loudly. Live slowly. And whenever you forget who you are, sit right here and listen. The lake always tells the truth. I finished reading. There was one final line. You were never too quiet, Brenda. You were simply surrounded by people who talked too loudly. I couldn't hold back anymore. I cried. Not the kind of crying that breaks you. The kind that puts you back together. I sat on that porch until the sun began to set. The sky turned pink and gold. The lake reflected every color. And for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. My phone buzzed. A message from Delaney. How's the cabin? I looked at the lake. Then I typed back. I think I just came home. I put the phone away. The sun disappeared behind the trees. I pulled the quilt around my shoulders. And in the silence, I could almost hear my grandmother's voice. The world doesn't know it yet, my quiet Brenda. I smiled through my tears. Neither do I, Grandma. Then I looked out across the lake. And let my real life begin. The next morning, I woke up at the cabin just after sunrise. For a few seconds, I didn't remember where I was. Then I heard it. Silence. No ringing phone. No demands. No messages asking for money. Just wind moving through the pines. I smiled. I made coffee and carried the mug onto the porch. The lake was covered in mist. Everything felt still. My phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. Then I looked. An email. From Eleanor Pierce. Subject: One last matter regarding your grandmother's estate. I opened it. Brenda. There is one final item your grandmother wanted transferred after her passing. It is not financially significant, but she was very specific that it belongs only to you. I will bring it by tomorrow afternoon if you're available. ***. I smiled. Of course. One more surprise. I replied immediately. I'll be here. The next afternoon, Eleanor arrived carrying a small cardboard box. She stepped onto the porch and looked out over the lake. Your grandmother loved this place. I know. She handed me the box. She said you would. I opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of photographs. Hundreds, maybe. Some black and white. Some faded. Some recent. I slowly lifted the first one. A young woman in a yellow dress. My grandmother. She couldn't have been more than 20. She was laughing. I'd never seen that version of her. I picked up another. She stood beside a gas station sign. Bertelli's. Another. A little boy wearing a school uniform. Sal Bertelli. I smiled. Then another photograph. I froze. It was me. I looked about 9 years old. I was sitting on the floor reading a book. I didn't even know the picture existed. I kept looking. Another picture. Age 12. Helping my grandmother carry groceries. Another. Age 16. Fixing her porch steps. Another. Age 22. asleep on the couch at the cabin. I looked up. Eleanor, she kept all these? Eleanor smiled. Every single one. I couldn't speak. At the bottom of the box sat one final envelope. My name was written on it. Again. I laughed softly. She really never stopped leaving letters. No, Eleanor said. She didn't. I opened it. Inside was a note. My quiet Brenda. I took photographs of you when you weren't looking because you never stayed still long enough to see yourself. I laughed through sudden tears. You have always been busy taking care of everyone else. So I kept these pictures to remind you of something important, asterisk asterisk. I looked down at the photographs spread across my lap. You had a beautiful life even while carrying difficult people through it. Tears filled my eyes. Don't remember only the painful parts. I kept reading. Remember the books you loved. The lake. The birds. The coffee. The music. Remember every patient who squeezed your hand and thanked you. Remember the people who loved you quietly, asterisk asterisk. I looked at Delaney's latest text sitting unread on my phone. Then back at the letter. You were never alone as often as you believed. A tear rolled down my face. There was one final sentence. Now go make memories that deserve new photographs. I folded the letter carefully. Eleanor sat beside me on the porch swing. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally she smiled. She knew you very well. I nodded. Better than anyone. Eleanor looked out at the lake. You know, during our last meeting, your grandmother said something interesting. I looked at her. She said she wasn't leaving you money. I frowned. She said she was leaving you permission. I stared at her. Permission. To rest. To choose myself. To stop apologizing for existing. To live. I looked across the lake again. The water was calm. The trees stood perfectly still. And for the first time in 35 years, I understood something my grandmother had been trying to teach me all along. A good life isn't built from money. It's built from peace. I smiled. Then I picked up my phone and sent Delaney a message. Bring coffee tomorrow. And maybe stay the weekend, asterisk asterisk. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then her reply. Already packing. I laughed. I looked at the photographs in my lap. At the lake. At the cabin. At the life waiting quietly in front of me. And I realized something wonderful. My grandmother had been right. The world didn't know it yet. But I finally did. The following spring, the cabin became my weekend home. Every Friday after work, I packed a bag, grabbed coffee, and drove to Pine Lake. Every Sunday evening, I returned feeling lighter than when I had arrived. Slowly, things changed. I slept better. I laughed more. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. I started saying no without feeling guilty. And something unexpected happened. My family stopped calling. At first, it felt strange. Then it felt peaceful. Months passed. The lottery money sat in investments and savings accounts. I bought a reliable SUV. I paid off my mortgage. I donated anonymously to Rosewood Memory Care. I funded a small scholarship program for nursing students who wanted to work in hospice care. And for the first time in my life, I spent money on myself. I bought books. A new winter coat. A ridiculously expensive coffee machine. Small things. Things that made me smile. One Saturday in May, Delaney arrived at the cabin carrying groceries and a potted sunflower. Housewarming gift, she announced. I've had the cabin for months. Then consider yourself officially warmed. I laughed. We spent the afternoon sitting on the porch. Talking. Not talking. Watching the lake. At sunset, Delaney looked at me. You know something? What? You smile differently now. I frowned. What does that mean? She smiled. You don't look like you're waiting for someone to ask you for something. I stared at her. Because she was right. For years, every happy moment in my life had been temporary. I was always bracing myself. Waiting. Expecting another emergency. Another request. Another crisis. I wasn't doing that anymore. I looked at the lake. I think I'm finally relaxing. Delaney smiled. I think you're finally living. A month later, I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. I almost didn't open it. Then I did. Brenda. I don't know if you'll read this. Maybe you shouldn't. But I've spent a long time thinking, ****. I failed you. I stopped. Read it again. Then continued. I spent so much time worrying about who needed help the most that I forgot to love the person who asked for the least. Tears blurred my vision. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what my mother saw in you, ****. I swallowed hard. The final sentence read. I hope your life is peaceful. You deserve ****. I folded the letter carefully. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply sat there. Then I walked onto the porch. The lake was calm. The evening air smelled like pine and rain. I thought about my father. About my mother. About Claire. I thought about little moments from childhood. Some good. Some painful. I realized something. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's putting down something heavy because you're tired of carrying it. I looked across the water. Then I whispered softly. I forgive you. The wind moved through the trees. And somehow, it felt like an answer. I went back inside. On the mantel above the fireplace sat my grandmother's photograph. The one of her in the yellow dress, laughing. I smiled at it. You really planned all of this, didn't you? The cabin remained quiet. But in my heart, I knew. She had never been preparing me for money. She had been preparing me for freedom. I turned off the lights and stood at the window one last time before bed. The lake reflected the moon. The world was still. Peaceful. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving. I wasn't sacrificing. I wasn't proving my worth. I was simply living. And that, I finally understood, was the greatest inheritance my grandmother had ever given me. 1 year later, I sat on the porch at Pine Lake with a cup of coffee in my hands. It was early autumn. The trees had begun turning shades of gold and red. The lake reflected every color like a painting. I had just turned 36. And for the first time in my entire life, I was happy. Not excited. Not relieved. Not temporarily okay. Truly happy. The cabin had changed. Or maybe I had. There were plants in the windows now. Books stacked beside the fireplace. A bird feeder hanging near the porch. And photographs. New photographs. Delaney laughing while burning pancakes. A sunrise over the lake. A nursing scholarship ceremony. Me. Smiling. Actually smiling. I kept them in frames all over the cabin. Because my grandmother had been right. I needed new memories. And I was making them. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. We spoke occasionally now. Small conversations. Careful ones. She had found a bookkeeping job. Ryan had started working construction. Their marriage was still complicated, but they were trying. The text read, "Tyler won his school reading award today. He reminds me of you. Thought you'd want to know asterisk asterisk." I smiled. Then I replied, "Tell him I'm proud of him." A minute later, another message arrived. "I will. Thanks, Bren asterisk asterisk." That was all. No requests. No guilt. No hidden expectations. Just words. Small, ordinary words. I put the phone away. The front door opened behind me. Delaney stepped outside carrying 2 sandwiches. "You've been sitting here forever." I laughed. "I know." She handed me one. Then she sat beside me. We watched the lake. "You know," she said, "I used to worry about you." I looked at her. "You looked like someone holding her breath all the time." I smiled softly. "I think I was." She nodded. "But not anymore." "No." We sat quietly. A flock of birds crossed the lake. The wind moved through the pine trees. Then I noticed something. I wasn't thinking about the lottery. Not at all. I wasn't thinking about my parents. Or the money. Or the recordings. Or even the pain. I was thinking about sandwiches. And birds. And whether it might rain later. I suddenly laughed. Delaney looked at me. "What?" I shook my head. "Nothing." "No, tell me." I smiled. "I think this is it." "What is?" I looked at the water. "This." She frowned. "This what?" I leaned back in my chair. "Peace." She stared at me for a second. Then she smiled. "Yeah." We sat there until sunset. The sky turned orange and pink. The lake glowed. I looked toward the old porch swing. And for just a moment, I could almost picture my grandmother sitting there. Yellow cardigan. Hands folded. Watching the lake. Watching me. I smiled. "Thank you, Grandma." The wind stirred gently. The bird feeder swayed. And somehow, I felt her answer. Not in words. Just in the stillness. I looked across the water one last time. Then I stood. I wasn't the quiet girl who gave everything away anymore. I wasn't the daughter who existed to solve everyone else's problems. I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I had chosen myself. I turned toward the warm light shining through the cabin windows. Delaney was already inside, humming while making tea. I smiled again. Then I walked toward the door. Toward my home. Toward my life. And without realizing it, I finally became exactly who my grandmother always knew I could be. 3 years later, on a crisp October afternoon, I found myself back at Bertelli's Gas and Snack. The green sign still flickered. The lottery display was still behind the counter. And Sal Bertelli was still working. He looked up and grinned. "Well, if it isn't my favorite millionaire." I laughed. "I'm still getting coffee. And I'm still giving you a discount." "Sal, you never give me a discount." He shrugged. "I keep offering." I smiled. A little girl stepped beside me. She couldn't have been more than 8. Dark braids. Oversized glasses. She held $2 tightly in her hand. She looked nervous. Sal noticed. "First lottery ticket?" he asked. The little girl nodded. Her mother looked embarrassed. "It's just for fun." She wanted to buy one for her grandfather. Sal smiled. Then he looked at me. I smiled back. Some memories never leave you. The little girl held up the money. "Can I get a scratch ticket?" Sal looked at me again. Then back at her. Cash, he asked gently. She nodded. I laughed. My grandmother would have loved this. The little girl bought the ticket. She scratched it immediately. Didn't win a thing. She looked disappointed. Then she smiled anyway. It's okay, she said. Grandpa will laugh. I stared at her. For a moment, I saw myself. I saw my grandmother. I saw 100 little moments that had somehow carried me here. I bought my coffee and walked outside. The autumn air was cool. I sat on a bench near the gas station. And my phone rang. Hello? Brenda? It was Tyler. Claire's oldest son. He was 16 now. Tall. Bookish. Always carrying a novel. Hey, buddy. I got accepted. I smiled. Accepted where? The nursing program. I blinked. What? He laughed. I want to do hospice care. For a second, I couldn't speak. Are you there? Yes. You don't think it's weird? I looked up at the sky. No. I smiled. I think it's beautiful. He exhaled in relief. I hoped you'd say that. We talked for 20 minutes. After we hung up, I sat there quietly. Life was strange. Wonderful. Unexpected. The things we give with love have a way of continuing long after we're gone. I drove to Pine Lake that evening. The cabin looked exactly as it should. Warm lights. Smoke curling from the chimney. Birds settling into the trees. Delaney opened the door before I reached the porch. You're late. I know. Dinner's almost ready. I smiled. Good. I stepped inside. Books on the table. A blanket on the couch. Music playing softly. Home. I looked around. Then at Delaney. Then at the framed photograph on the mantel. My grandmother. Yellow dress. Laughing. I walked over and straightened the frame. You did it, Grandma. Delaney looked up. What? I smiled. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Because she had done it. She had taught me that love isn't sacrifice without limits. Strength isn't giving away every piece of yourself. And family isn't defined by who demands the most from you. Family is who listens. Who stays. Who makes room for your peace. I turned off the porch light before bed and stepped outside one last time. The lake shimmered beneath the moon. The world was quiet. I wrapped my sweater around myself and smiled. 3 years ago, I thought I had won the lottery. I hadn't. The money was never the prize. The prize was this. Peace. Freedom. A life that finally belonged to me. I looked across the water and whispered softly. I listened, Grandma. The wind moved gently through the pine trees. And I smiled. Because after all these years, I finally knew exactly who I was.